Welcome everyone to Stripe Sessions, and now I'm joined by Andrew Robinson, who's an SA here in the Expo Hall, and he's got a booth just behind us called Unified Commerce, so if you're at the event, definitely go and check out the booth. So Andrew, thanks for being here. We were chatting earlier because I've not actually seen a setup like you've got here today. Tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we have probably the biggest booth that we've ever had at one of the Stripe Sessions events here called Unified Commerce. We've taken a lot of feedback on board from what users told us last year at Sessions. So this year what we've got is we've not only got the sort of booth setup where we've got all of the Stripe devices and all of the hardware on the show, but we've also got some mock pop-up stores, call them vignettes, where we're showing the technology in a semi-real world environment. So a lot of what we heard as feedback last year from our users was, this is great, but how does it really work? How do I use it? So now we've actually got a setup where people can come along and have a look and actually see, like, okay, this is how it would really work with a point of sale app, with a setup that's got a catalog with different products in, and really showing what that end-to-end customer journey can look like.
So let me start at the beginning. Unified commerce sounds like a great phrase, but what does it actually mean if you're a developer?
Yeah, so unified commerce is really about unifying, as the name suggests, the online and the in-store journey that a customer would go on. So, for example, most of us have bought something physically in store. Most of us have bought something online. And I'm sure we're all aware that they're very different checkout experiences, even with the same merchant. There may be certain payment methods that are offered online that they don't offer in store, or vice versa. It might be that their online checkout is this wonderful, slick, modern experience using Stripe payment element, but their in-store environment might be using older legacy hardware that maybe doesn't have the same look and feel to it. So what Unified Commerce is about bringing those two journeys together. But also on the back end, it's about a consistent experience for developers and a consistent experience for all that back end data that sits behind it. It's the same Stripe API, whether you're using it for payment element or whether you're using it for terminal. So it's then, from a developer perspective, it's the consistency. A payment method is a payment method, whether it's online or in store. A customer is a customer. A subscription is a subscription. So it's not just necessarily that unifying experience from the customer standpoint, but it's also unifying it from the developer standpoint. You then have a consistent set of APIs and a consistent experience.
Yeah, I saw a lot of hardware at the booth. There's at least, I think, 10 or 20 terminals you've got there of different types. But if I was a developer who'd built an experience that was a mobile app, maybe with a website, what should I be thinking about here? Like, how do I pick a terminal or integrate it with what I've got currently? Yeah,
so we have, at the moment, our own what we call first-party devices. So these are the Stripe manufactured devices, like the S700. And actually, just this morning at the product keynote, you'd have heard John Afaki, who announced that we now have 4 new Verifone devices that we're integrating with as well. What's nice with those Verifone devices is it's the same consistent API. So the same SDK that you would use for integrating with our own hardware, you can now integrate with those 4 Verifone devices as well. I think from like a mobile developer perspective, we're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of uptake in technologies like tap to pay, both on iPhone and on Android devices as well. Because what this is doing is it's removing one of the biggest blockers, which is the physical hardware side of it. By now being able to accept payments across multiple different payment methods, cards, mobile wallets, on an iPhone device or on an Android device, that's really making it much, much easier. If you can write a mobile app in React or using our iOS native SDK, you can integrate with Stripe and you can take a payment. There's no PCI burden. It's a really, really slick experience for developers, because if you can build a mobile app, you can build a mobile app to take payments.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because when I first started building payments in apps, PCI was a big factor. I had people typing in credit card numbers directly into web forms. Why isn't there a PCI burden if I use one of these devices?
Yeah, so if the device is a tap-to-pay device, certain Android devices or iPhones, because there's no physical card slot in the device, there's no certification that's needed from an encryption standpoint, because you're not decoding EMV2 data off of a chip. However, for tap to pay as well, there isn't that burden, because all of that payment surface is managed by either Google, Android, or managed via Apple. So once your app hands off to the payment piece, that's outside of your control. But at the same time, that means it's not something you need to be worried about, because all the tokenization of the card details and how that contactless transaction happens and the exchange of cryptograms, that's all handled by Apple in the iOS environment. So it really means that that's a huge burden that's abstracted away from you.
Yeah. So obviously this is unified, but explain to me how it is that if someone types in a card number on one site or they tap to pay on a device, how, as a developer, how do I know it's the same customer? Because it seems like these are random pieces of data that I've got to deal with.
Yeah, so for an online journey, typically a merchant would know a lot about their customer. You would have their email address, their telephone number, their postal address, because they're ordering an item that they're probably going to have delivered to them. They might do pick up in store, but you're still going to have to then know who that person is when they go and pick the item up in store. But with an in-person transaction, as you said, it's kind of semi-anonymous. You've not got all those data points. And there's a couple of ways in which you can solve for this. The first one is by using what we call the card fingerprint in Stripe. So if you present the same card in store, whether that's contactless or inserted chip and pin or mag swipe, and then use that same card online, the card fingerprint that we generate at Stripe will be consistent. So you then know that those two payment methods are the same, which then means if you have, this payment method is owned by a customer, you can then attribute that same payment method to it. It gets a little bit more complicated when we talk about maybe multi-processor environments, or if we're talking about adding Apple Pay and Google Pay, because the card fingerprint will be different. The physical card versus that card in an Apple wallet or a Google wallet. What we can do there is take advantage of a network feature which is called payment account reference, which then gives you a consistent, outside the scope of PCI reference that you can then use to attribute those two cards to the same account, if you will, and therefore the same customer. So then it's bringing, to the name suggests, unifying all that data together. So then okay, this customer made these purchases online, they've made these purchases in store.
And you mentioned something earlier when we were chatting, that really interested me, that this seems like a very easy way to bring Google Pay and Apple Pay into your system, maybe for merchants that haven't done that before. But it also seems like these devices give you some sort of element of almost future-proofing. As Stripe develop things in the future, this provides a fairly easy way to keep up to speed with those changes.
Yeah, it is. So one of the ones that we have available now is the ability to take payments via WeChat Pay using a QR code on the reader. And that's something that we've just unlocked, and you turn it on and it's there available as a new payment method. Really, really great customer experience. QR code on the reader, customer scans it on their cell phone, and then that puts them straight into the native app experience for that payment method on their phone. So that's available now for WeChat Pay. But yeah, I mean, the nice thing as well with the tap to pay technology is the cost of entry is very, very low. There's no specialist hardware you need to buy. You don't need to buy a card reader that's there just to take payments on. It unlocks it that if you already have an iPhone or an Android device that you use already as either a fixed point of sale till or as a mobile point of sale, you can take a payment on that device.
And so we were chatting earlier also about the interesting quirk difference between the US and the UK, where you're at currently, that's in the US, but not obviously typing in PIN numbers that often into things. So you could arguably do a lot of this through a regular phone, but there's a special case for the UK.
There is, yeah. So the UK is a bit of an oddity in this regard. So when contactless transactions are made with European regulations and UK regulations, there's certain monetary value. So if the transaction is over £50 or €50, or the total number of contactless transactions is over a certain amount, you'll be requested to input a PIN. Now, for the EU and for EFTA countries that are using the euro, that is what's called an online PIN. So that is where you would tap the card, we get a response from the card network that says we need a PIN, and you can then just do PIN on glass. So on an iPhone or an Android device, you can just type the PIN in, and that PIN is then validated by the card issuer, and we then get a response back saying approve or decline. With the UK, we are predominantly an offline PIN market, which means that in order to verify that PIN, we have to verify it against the PIN that's stored on the chip on the card. That means the card has to be inserted. Now, things are getting better in this regard. More and more banks in the UK are moving to an online PIN model, but it is not going to be something that's solved overnight. Yeah. This is something that is going to take quite a while for this online PIN movement. It is coming, but it is one of those slight quirks in the UK that makes some of the tap-to-pay offerings not maybe quite as compelling as they would be in other parts of the world. One solution to that is mobile wallets, because if you use Apple Pay or Google Pay, even if you're over the contactless limit, because you've authenticated that transaction with Face ID, Touch ID, fingerprint, or so on, that stands in for the PIN for authenticating that transaction. So that, again, can be the unlock here, that if you're concerned about those contactless limits, mobile wallets will help not get around that, but they'll help you be able to make sure that transaction's authenticated correctly.
Yeah. I think this is an absolutely fascinating topic for developers, because really there's such a huge amount of potential. So I'd recommend, if you're at sessions this next couple of days, come to the Expo Hall, see Andrew. He's here at the Unified Commerce booth. But absolutely loads to talk about here. Thanks for giving us a preview on what's an absolutely massive topic. And we'll see everybody again in just a few minutes.